Welcome to Epic Reads Unfolded, where we take a look at books everyone's talking about and really kind of get to the heart of what makes them tick.
Yeah.
Today, we're cracking open Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
Okay.
You know, that spiritual guide that's helped so many people find a little more peace in their lives.
Right.
What's really interesting is how the book came about.
Okay.
Tolle had this incredibly intense period where he was suffering so much caused by his own mind
Yeah.
that he felt like he couldn't even live with himself.
Oh, wow.
And that experience led to a total shift in his consciousness.
So it's almost like hitting rock bottom became like a launching pad for him.
Right.
And that idea of the mind as the source of our suffering is at the core of the book.
So he's not saying thinking is bad.
No.
Right? It's more about how we let our minds run wild.
Exactly. Tolle makes a distinction between the mind as a tool useful for problem solving and navigating the world,
Right.
and the mind as a relentless chatterbox that keeps us trapped in these cycles of worry and negativity. He even gives a striking statistic.
Okay.
80 to 90% of most people's thoughts are not only useless, but actually harmful.
Wow.
They drain our energy and prevent us from experiencing the present moment.
So imagine you're constantly bombarded by these useless negative thoughts.
Right.
No wonder we feel exhausted and stressed.
Exactly.
But if we're not our minds, then who are we?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tolle points to consciousness itself.
Okay.
That awareness that's always there, even when our minds are racing.
Right.
He calls this our true self, the essence of being that exists beyond our thoughts and emotions.
And that ties into this idea that pain comes from resisting the present moment.
Yeah.
We're so busy dwelling on the past or worrying about the future that we miss out on the only place where life is actually happening right now.
And it's our identification with the mind, that ego part of us, that fuels this resistance. The ego loves to hold on to past hurts and anxieties about the future, constantly trying to escape the present moment.
So it's like we're creating our own suffering.
In a way, yes. And to make things even more interesting,
Okay.
Tolle introduces this concept of the pain body.
Okay, now that sounds a little spooky.
Yeah.
What exactly is this pain body?
Think of it like a creature that lives inside us,
So.
lying dormant until we feed it with negative thoughts and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Then it wakes up and takes over, driving us to create even more situations that generate pain.
Oh, wow.
It can manifest as anger,
Right.
a need to be right,
Okay.
a tendency to sabotage ourselves,
Yeah.
or even a craving for drama in our relationships.
It's almost like having a little monster in your head whispering, be unhappy, be afraid.
Yes, and because it's rooted in unconscious patterns,
Mm-hmm.
the pain body can be tricky to deal with.
Right.
It might even disguise itself as something else, like righteous anger or the need to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's just hungry for more pain.
So how do we escape this cycle?
Well, that's where the power of now comes in.
Okay.
Tolle's central argument is that the key to finding true peace and liberation is accessing the present moment.
Okay.
He sees our obsession with the past and future, what he calls psychological time, as a major roadblock to enlightenment.
So it's not that we shouldn't think about the past or plan for the future,
No.
but that we shouldn't get so caught up in them that we lose touch with the now.
Exactly. Tolle's view is that all negativity comes from this accumulation of psychological time.
Okay.
Too much past, too much future, not enough now.
Right.
And to help us access this present moment, he talks about various portals into what he calls the unmanifested,
Yeah.
this realm of pure being that exists beyond the mind.
Okay. That sounds pretty abstract.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of one of these portals?
One of the most accessible portals is the inner body.
Okay.
By shifting our attention away from the constant chatter of the mind and into the physical sensations of our body,
Right.
we can create a space of stillness and connect with the aliveness of the present moment. It's like dropping anchor in the here and now.
So instead of getting lost in my thoughts, I could focus on my breath, the feeling of my feet on the ground, or the warmth of the sun on my skin.
Exactly. And these sensations act as anchors, bringing us back to the present moment and helping us create a space of stillness within.
Okay.
It's a way of grounding ourselves in the midst of the mental storm.
And that's just one of the portals that Tolle describes, right?
Right. He also talks about things like becoming aware of the silence and space around us,
Mm-hmm.
creating gaps in the stream of thought through meditation,
Okay.
and even using the experience of death as a potential gateway to enlightenment.
Wow, death is a gateway to enlightenment. That's a pretty intense concept.
It is, but what's fascinating here is that Tolle emphasizes that accessing the unmanifested isn't about achieving some blissful state in the future.
Right.
It's about realizing that this formless, timeless dimension is always available to us right here, right now.
So it's not about escaping reality,
Right.
but about experiencing reality more fully.
Exactly. It's about tapping into a deeper level of awareness that's always present,
Hmm.
even amidst the chaos of our everyday lives.
And Tolle doesn't see this as passive resignation, right?
Right.
It's not about just accepting whatever happens.
You're right. He calls it surrender,
Okay.
which is more about an inner alignment with the present moment.
Right.
It's not about giving up, but rather about letting go of the ego's need to control and resist.
So instead of struggling against life, we're learning to flow with it.
Precisely. And within that flow, Tolle suggests we
Mhm.
discover a deeper level of power and wisdom that's always within us. He calls it surrendered action,
Okay.
where our actions are infused with the energy of being.
Can you give us an example of what surrendered action might look like in real life?
Imagine you're facing a difficult situation at work.
All right.
Instead of reacting with stress and anxiety,
All right.
you take a moment to connect with the stillness within. You acknowledge the challenge, but you don't let it consume. You take action from a place of clarity and presence,
Right.
trusting that you have the resources to navigate the situation.
So it's about acting with awareness and intention rather than being driven by our fears and anxiety.
Exactly. And that shift in consciousness can make a world of difference in how we experience our lives, our relationships, and our work. And this idea of surrendered action isn't just about our personal lives. Tolle also talks about how this shift in consciousness has implications for our collective well-being, for the state of the world as a whole.
He doesn't sugarcoat things, does he? He actually calls humanity a dangerously insane and very sick species.
Yeah.
Those are pretty strong words.
They are, but he's quick to point out that it's not a judgment, but rather an observation based on the violence, greed, and environmental destruction we see all around us.
Right.
And he links this dysfunction directly to our collective resistance to the now, to our inability to break free from this psychological time warp of wanting, craving, and fear. He even suggests that our modern obsession with progress and material possessions has only intensified this underlying sense of unease.
So we're basically working against ourselves, trying to find happiness in things that ultimately keep us trapped in a cycle of dissatisfaction.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
But Tolle doesn't leave us hanging in this bleak assessment.
Okay.
He sees a glimmer of hope in what he calls the emergence of a new consciousness,
Okay.
a shift in awareness that's happening both individually and collectively.
So he's saying there's a chance we can turn things around.
He believes it's not only possible, but essential for our survival as a species.
Wow.
He calls it a quantum leap in the evolution of consciousness,
Okay.
a necessary step if we want to create a more peaceful and sustainable world. He points to the growing number of people who are questioning the old ways of thinking and seeking a deeper sense of meaning and connection in their lives.
That's encouraging. But I imagine there are some pretty big obstacles to this kind of transformation, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
Absolutely. Tolle talks about how one of the biggest obstacles is our tendency to identify with our problems.
Okay.
The ego loves to latch on to our difficulties and make them part of our identity.
It's like we're afraid to let go of our problems because they've become so familiar, so much a part of who we think we are.
Exactly. And this resistance to change can show up in all sorts of subtle ways: procrastination, complaining, blaming others, even getting caught up in the drama of our lives.
Right.
These are all forms of unconscious resistance to the present moment.
So if we want to embrace the power of now, we need to be willing to let go of these old patterns of thinking and behaving,
Yeah.
to step outside our comfort zones and face the uncertainty of the present moment.
It's a challenge, but it's a challenge worth taking on.
Right.
Tolle offers some practical suggestions for how we can cultivate this presence in our daily lives.
Okay.
One of the simplest but most powerful tools is self-observation. He encourages us to check in with ourselves throughout the day,
Mm-hmm.
to ask ourselves, am I at ease at this moment?
It sounds so simple, but I can see how it could be really helpful in becoming aware of when we're slipping back into that unconscious autopilot mode.
It's like a little wake-up call, reminding us to bring our attention back to the present moment. He also emphasizes the importance of paying attention to the body,
Yeah.
for the physical sensations that are always present within us.
Like those portals we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The breath, the feeling of our feet on the ground.
Exactly. By focusing on these sensations, we can anchor ourselves in the present moment and create a space of stillness within. He even suggests that we can use everyday activities as opportunities to practice presence.
All right.
Whether we're washing dishes, walking the dog, or even stuck in traffic, we can bring a quality of awareness to these simple acts and transform them into moments of mindfulness.
So it's not about adding more things to our to-do list, but about shifting our perspective on the things we're already doing.
Precisely, it's about bringing a quality of presence to our everyday lives moment by moment.
Right.
And this practice isn't just about finding inner peace.
Okay.
Tolle suggests it's also essential for creating more fulfilling relationships.
That makes sense. If we're constantly distracted by our thoughts or worries, we can't really be present with the people around us.
We might be physically there, but mentally and emotionally we're checked out.
Right.
And that creates a barrier to intimacy and connection.
It's like we're not really seeing the other person for who they are because we're so caught up in our own heads.
Tolle's point is that true relationship can only happen when there's an awareness of being, when we're able to connect with the essence of the other person beyond the masks and the roles we all play.
And that's where the image of the screen comes in.
Right.
Seeing the other person's body and mind as a screen behind which we can perceive their true essence.
Exactly. And that awareness of shared being naturally leads to greater compassion and understanding. Of course, Tolle acknowledges that relationships can be challenging, especially intimate relationships. Yeah. He talks about how we tend to project our own unconscious patterns onto our partners, and how the pain body, when it gets triggered, can wreak havoc in our interactions.
It's like those old patterns of blame, anger, and control just take over.
Right.
And we end up hurting the people we care about most.
It's painful, but Tolle suggests that even these difficult situations can be opportunities for growth.
Okay.
He encourages us to use the friction of relationships to become more conscious, to observe our own reactions, and to bring a quality of awareness to our interactions.
So instead of blaming our partner, we take responsibility for our own inner state.
Right. It's a powerful shift in perspective because ultimately the most important relationship we have is the one with ourselves.
And as we cultivate presence and awareness within ourselves, we naturally bring a different quality of being to our interactions with others.
It's like ripples spreading outward. The more present we are within ourselves, the more present we can be in our relationships, in our communities, and in the world.
So The Power of Now isn't just a self-help book. It's a guide to transforming our relationships, our communities, and ultimately the world. Tolle's vision is of a world where people are awake to their true nature, living in harmony with themselves, each other, and the planet. It does feel like he's pointing towards a more utopian kind of world.
He is, and it might seem like a far-off dream, but Tolle believes that this kind of transformation is not only possible, but the only real path to lasting peace.
It's a powerful vision, and it makes you think about what kind of world we could create if we all really embrace the power of now.
If we stopped letting our minds run the show.
Right.
And tapped into that wisdom and compassion that's already within us.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
There really is.
And before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one more fascinating idea from The Power of Now that I wanted to touch. Tolle talks about the possibility of achieving a state of conscious immortality. Now, before you think we've gone off the deep end here, he's not talking about living forever in these physical bodies.
No, not at all. It's not about some futuristic quest for eternal youth.
So what is he talking about?
He's talking about becoming aware of a dimension of being that exists beyond birth and death.
Okay.
A timeless realm that we can get glimpses of through deep meditation, the experience of silence in space, and even, as he suggests, at the moment of physical death.
So it's like becoming aware of that formless consciousness that continues even after the body dies. Almost like shedding a skin, but instead of a physical one, it's the egoic mind we're leaving behind.
That's a great way to put it. And Tolle suggests that many people miss this opportunity because they're still so identified with the mind and its fears.
Right.
They're clinging to the familiar world of form and miss the doorway to this unmanifested realm.
It reminds me of that saying, we don't fear death, we fear the unknown. But Tolle seems to suggest that if we can familiarize ourselves with this unmanifested realm throughout our lives, by cultivating presence and loosening the ego's grip, we can approach that transition with more peace, maybe even a sense of anticipation.
He's not encouraging people to seek out death, of course.
Right.
It's more about living so fully in the present moment that death becomes simply another transition, emerging back into the source from which we came.
It's a pretty mind-blowing idea,
It is.
and it really speaks to the transformative potential of this book.
Yeah,
It's not just about finding a bit more peace in our daily lives,
right.
but about fundamentally changing our understanding of who we are and what it means to be alive.
And it challenges us to imagine what's possible if we truly embrace the power of now,
Right.
if we step out of the ego's illusions and align with the wisdom and compassion of our true selves.
Well, after this conversation, I'm definitely feeling inspired to revisit The Power of Now. It's one of those books that offers something new every time you read it.
I agree, it's not just a book to be read, but a book to be lived.
Right.
Tully invites us to take these ideas off the page and into our lives, to experiment with them, and see for ourselves the power of becoming present.
So what does this all mean for you, dear listener? We encourage you to pick up a copy of The Power of Now and embark on your own deep dive. See what resonates with you, play around with Tully's suggestions, and most importantly, be open to the possibility of a life lived in the fullness of the present moment.
And remember, this journey of awakening is a process, a constant unfolding. Be patient with yourself, stay curious, and trust the wisdom that's already within you.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into The Power of Now. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and a little inspiration for your own journey of transformation. Please subscribe to our channel for more exciting podcasts.